This is another sad story. It's nothing like Floyd. It's just a shame it happens this way. And this cop looks like a kid. Like I say, I think you should be at least 30 to be a police officer. And for God's sakes, can we please come out with some non-lethal rounds of some sort, more like a tranquilizer? Like if you can put a rhino down with a tranquilizer, I'm sure we can come out with something that doesn't have to take a life. You know, I don't agree with the guy fighting the police. I mean, it was just a textbook arrest. Simple, drinking and driving. I don't think that they were racial. I don't think that it was hate. I think it was just simply officers getting called, to the scene of a guy that fell asleep at a drive-thru. And, maybe they didn't necessarily need to call the cops. Maybe they could have just woke him up, sent him on his way. But what if, he was drunk driving and ran somebody over or ran into somebody and hurt somebody, So, I mean, this is just everyday occurrence. I hope it doesn't turn into another big racial issue, but unfortunately, those elites, those globus elites will take anything like this and just toss gasoline on the fire, ramp it all up to cause division, to divide and conquer. We all love each other. We see it. We know. We interact all day with each other, everywhere. There's no need for this.
A few hours ago, the Fulton County, Georgia District Attorney, Paul Howard Jr., charged former Atlanta police officer Garrett Rolfe with murder in addition to 10 other criminal charges. If convicted, Rolfe faces execution. The alleged crime at the heart of it is the shooting of a suspect called Rayshard Brooks. We told you the details of it 2 nights ago. Last Friday, Rayshard Brooks passed out drunk in the drive-thru lane of a Wendy's in Atlanta. Brooks's car was blocking traffic, so restaurant employees called the police. They arrived, Rolfe and his partner. They woke Brooks and they asked him if he had been drinking. Brooks admitted that he had been. Officers then moved forward with a textbook DUI arrest, nothing unusual. But when they tried to take Brooks into custody, Brooks started swinging. He fought the officers to the ground and then snatched a taser from one of them and tried to use it against Officer Rolfe. When Brooks raised the taser to fire, Rolfe shot and killed him. Here's some of the video.
Hey, sir. You right? You're sitting in the drive-thru line here. Blah, 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 blah. Stop. Very good.
I just had a few drinks. That's it.
How many?
1.5. Like I said, I was into the second cup. I wasn't even... I told her, babe, let's go. Because I'm hungry.
What kind of drinks did you have?
I'm not sure. It's something she ordered. She said top shelf or whatever.
Right.
Just take me home.
Man, pretty basic so far. I mean, the cops were polite. They weren't harassing him. He was pretty polite back. Everything was going fine until he actually was able to overpower both cops, take the taser, run. And, I know that he was facing the other way running, but he did turn and he did go to fire something. And just the way these police are trained, which maybe there should be changes in that, the cop fired. Now, I know it was just a taser, but if he did tase the cop dropped to the ground, he would have been able to grab his firearm, which is lethal. And I understand that a couple weeks or a week before, in the same area, some cops stopped some protesters or rioters, apparently college students. They used a taser on them, and the taser was considered a lethal weapon then. A couple weeks later, now it's not. But I can only imagine what it's like when somebody turns and fires something at your face, and the reaction wouldn't have not been a thought out reaction. It would have been what he's trained to do. It would have been a natural reaction. So at this point, I mean, the guy should have just understood that his toxicity levels were high. He had alcohol in his system. The officers were being fair. They weren't abusing verbally or physically. I mean, it should have just been a simple arrest. But please don't stop watching. Get to the end, because after he gets shot, you really should see what happens. I don't think a lot of people have seen it.
Oh, I'm ready to go.
So you had about 1.5 drinks, but you don't remember what kind of drinks they were?
No, sir.
All right.
I really don't, Mr. Ross.
All right, I think you've had too much. Hands behind your back for me. Here, put your hands behind your back.
And that's where it gets out of hand.
Hey, stop fighting! Stop fighting! Stop fighting! Stop fighting! You're gonna get tased! You're gonna get tased! Stop!
Mr. Ross.
I warned him. Stop. Please stop.
Hands off the taser! Hands off the taser! Hands off the taser!
That was a very strong man.
Stop fighting! Taser! I 63.
After the shooting, Officer Rolfe tried to keep Rayshard Brooks alive. He performed CPR on the man he just shot.
Mr. Brooks, keep breathing. Mr. Brooks, keep breathing for me.
Mr. Brooks, keep breathing, Rolfe said. Keep breathing for me. No matter how much you look at these videos or how closely, it's a tragedy every time. A father of 3 girls is dead. The question is, was it murder? Ask yourself, how do you think you would do, regardless of what color you are, if you snatched a cop's taser and tried to shoot him with it? Most likely you'd be dead. No one would march in your memory. No one would burn a building in your name. No one would consider your death controversial, much less a racial act. That's what happens when you attack police officers with their own weapons. Everyone knows that. But in this case, things are very different. Officer Rolfe is facing the death penalty. He's been charged by a DA who's under enormous political pressure to prosecute. The mob wants vengeance now. They've expressed that by burning the Wendy's where Rayshard Brooks died to the ground. They've committed violence. Will they commit more if he's not charged? That has to be weighing on Paul Howard. And not just that. Paul Howard is fighting for his job. Howard is facing a runoff election soon. Howard is also being investigated for sexual harassment and for stealing money from a nonprofit. So Paul Howard has every reason to change the subject and to bow immediately to the mob's demands, and that's what he's doing. During his press conference today, Howard described Rayshard Brooks, the man who went berserk on 2 police officers and knocked them to the ground, as, quote, jovial. Watch Howard's statement here and compare it to the video we just played you.
Mr. Brooks, on the night of this incident, was calm, he was cordial, and really displayed a cooperative nature. Secondly, even though Mr. Brooks was slightly impaired, his demeanor during this incident was almost jovial.
Until he resisted arrest.
You just watched the tape. Calm and cooperative are probably the first words that came to mind, especially the part where Brooks grabbed the cop's taser and fired it at him. Just 2 weeks ago, this very same prosecutor, the one you just saw, Paul Howard, noted at a press conference, and we're quoting, a taser is considered a deadly weapon under Georgia law. Whatever, that was then. By the way, it was a taser. It could very easily have been Officer Rolfe's gun. Brooks would not have known the difference between a pistol and a taser in the middle of a brawl. Had that been the case, Officer Rolfe would be dead right now, and you never would have heard the story because no one in the media would have cared enough to tell you. Still, the prosecutor would like you to know that Mr. Brooks was cordial and no threat at all.